Happy Monday. Um, Today is a double feature for Back to Basics Practice Management, and we are in our session 3. And I am excited about our guest today. We will be talking about branding. More importantly, we are going to be talking about branding with a human touch. And so I'm thrilled to have as our guest Jake Kleinman Phillips. He is the CEO and brand design strategist of Touchpoint Design. And I'm going to have him come on shortly because I'd like to talk with him about how he got into this lane, what his mission is about. And we are going to talk about the branding piece in a physician's practice that I'm not sure that we actually, talk about these things within the physician practice about how we convey our message to our patients and as a practice and the services that we provide and the care that we provide for our patients. So without further ado, we are going to dive in with all things branding. Hi, Jake. How are you?
Hey, good morning. Good morning. I'm doing lovely. How are you?
Excellent. Excellent. Not bad for a dreary day, right? So there
These
we
overcasts,
go.
they're the best days, man. I'm telling you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm excited about our session today, largely because branding. I think from my own experience and being in having to manage a practice, and also just learning from the conversations that I've had in the past few months about physician practices and where does branding come to play. All of us as consumers, we tend to think branding is like retail or is like television or things of that nature, right? Those are kind of the norms that we think about in terms of branding. And I think with healthcare, it's a little bit different on what that branding means, right? Yet,
Yeah.
I feel like the concept of the actual client consumer is still the same consumer that goes to the store and buys clothes, goes to the grocery store and buys food, buys a car because they need a car. And so we're
hmm
still talking about the same consumer, but now we're into the healthcare sector. But before we go there, I want to know about you. I want to know how you got into your branding strategy, and what your mission, and how are you helping folks really resonate and connect with how they show up in their business.
Awesome. So do you want me to kind of start from the beginning a little bit, paint a picture, I guess, and we'll
Sure,
end up on healthcare somewhere?
absolutely.
I'm excited about this because this industry, I think it's not always thought of as branding to be kind of fueled into relationships in different industries. You think of branding on a lot of the high end luxury brands. You're like, oh, that's a great brand, and you recognize the words. But when it comes to relationship buildings in healthcare, we're going to talk a little bit more about it. But I'm super excited to kind of pull the curtain away to how branding applies to this industry specifically. So my name is Jake, and it's lovely to meet you guys. I call myself a brand design strategist, and what that really means, it's two parts where I, as an executor, build beautiful designs. I create things and bring them to life, but at the same time, the strategist side of that is creating things with intention. So every word, every pixel, every color, everything has a reason and a purpose behind what you're creating. And so when you combine those worlds, for me, my job is to help my clients get from A to B and to Z even. And anything that I'm creating is the bridge to helping them get there. And I guess from kind of how I got into this, because the roles kind of they we all go through pivots in our life, right? Where things kind of make sense and you run into coincidences. And, my journey started at design school at Savannah College of Art and Design down in Georgia. And I actually was studying industrial design, which is kind of I don't know if you're fully aware of it, but it's kind of like mass produced consumer products. So you're getting to, create tangible objects and tangible things for humans. And we learned a principle called human centered design during kind of this avenue when we're all kind of in this big incubator, designing together, and it was really fun. And we learned that, the center and the core of all the things that we were designing were always revolved around the end user. So whether that was a human specifically, or that was the bees that were pollinating the flowers out in the environment of a farm, or that was wherever the user was, we were always sensitive to making sure that the end result was we were asking the right questions, we were communicating the right things. And so one of a really good example is, like, there's a lot of cups and water bottles that don't fit in cup holders because maybe that designer, that front end user, didn't necessarily consider who it was for. So that's how that's how intention plays into, say, a mass produced object. And ever since then, I had a lot of different opportunities and experiences that I've lived over in England and taught design, and I worked in product design companies, and my backgrounds and my parents were in construction and entrepreneurs. One had owned a chocolate factory for a while.
Wow.
kind of diverse experiences. So I had this plethora of just exposure in so many different ways that people run businesses and bring their lives and their skills to life. And then I ended up opening my business. This is actually the month before COVID hit. So we're talking February 2020 is when I had
Oh
opened
my.
Touchpoint Design. Yeah, yep. But the thing was, COVID, gosh, it sounds like yesterday that we're talking about these things, but
I know.
we're talking like
I know.
4 years later, it actually helped my business grow, because a lot of people that got affected by COVID actually kind of cut off the things that they no longer really wanted or needed in their lives. And they doubled back down to, all right, look at, this is, instead of spending all our money on all these things, let's just spend it on these expenses. And so a lot of people doubled down, right? And they went, I'm going to go, build this, room that I've wanted to paint for years and I never got to. And so they did a lot of home improvement things. But then the other thing was, a lot of them opened businesses. So everyone started to, align their passions with what they actually loved. And so my business got off to this great start in terms of being able to meet people where they were. And it evolved, ever since then. And so now what I'm focused on with my clients is building brands, building websites, building things that are going to help them, bring their vision to life and help them, help their humans that they serve. And so Touchpoint is more of a way for us to be able to help our businesses connect with their humans that they exist for better. And we do it through beautiful branding, intentional designs, and even websites and all the rest of the things that are going to help them up level and be shown as that authority or the expert in their industry, or have that language that isn't cookie cutter, that just speaks to everyone and speaks to the specific people that are your audience. So that's kind of how my path evolved and where I am today with you.
So I have to say that's an incredible story. That how you began, but let's even just peel back the onion. Your background in history that lends itself, from your parents' background, and I can see where you gravitated towards your own entrepreneurship and having to be exposed. And I really like the industrial design that you talked about with the human center design exposure that you had, while in school. And what drew me to that topic. So let's go back to what you said about, relationships and building relationships. But even before then, the independent practices that are out there, physician practices, are what I believe the small business in our community. They are still their own, this is the heartbeat of some areas in rural or wherever they may be. They need access to, a physician or a practice to be able to be taken care of. And in that, in that community is a relationship building. And in that, it's also their own business, their viability, their satisfaction and their sustainability. And so part of when I think about, branding, and when I think about building relationships, is that in these practices, what how do they convey and how do they relate and how to connect with their patients, not only from,
Absolutely.
doctor patient relationship, but also practice as a whole, the staff, and the care team. And that's important because it's really valuable when you hear generations and generations of families that have come to the same practice, be it primary care or even in specialty practices, that especially for primary care, the relationship that they know between mom and dad, and then grandfather and grandmother, and children to
Hmm.
grandchildren, great grandchildren. I mean, it's a testament to the longevity that they're in, but also it's a testament to the relationship that they built. And also just that they get to just know them. When they walk in the door, it's kind of like being in Cheers to some extent, but they're coming in for very different reasons.
Right.
But they
Yeah.
know, Mary that's at the front desk. Oh, I know you. Hey, how's it going? It's been sometimes things like that. And that, I think, is the most important piece that I feel can be amiss, in the way that a message can be conveyed. So let's talk about your process. I'm, let's say I'm practice X, I'm looking to open my doors, for example. I am now, delving into my own path. I want to open my own practice, and, I am looking to either build a website or, build branding,
Hmm.
not knowing anything about that. What's our first step? Walk us through kind of, what we need to do for an awareness, and walking into your process. How do we do that with you?
Yeah, of course. And I think ultimately I think talking about this, there's two types of businesses as well. Ones that are just getting started, so they're newer, and ones that might have been in business already for 10, 20, 30 years, right? However long they've been in existence, but the process is still the same. And we can kind of get a little granular with, the differences as well. But ultimately, big picture of, the process and the steps. First step, I would hop on a call with my clients just to see if we're the right fit for each other, because a lot of clients may think that it all starts from a need. If you're aware that you have a need, and hey, I don't have alignment with the messaging that I have, or your your things are outdated and they don't necessarily reflect the current measures that you look like right now, or maybe you're going through a, let's say, existing business, a growth or a hiring phase, and you've pivoted your model, or there's a lot of reasons why a lot of people may look towards branding to be able to help them up level themselves and take big action on that. So first is initially trying to align ourselves to see if we're the right people to help. Is that a need that we can solve? And that's what we really want to align. So I always call it a fit call that I hop on with my clients, just to make sure we're on the same page, to see if this is something we can actually help with. And then step two from there, the way that I work with my clients is we do a deep dive. We call it a brand ignite. And it's a deep dive session where we pull out all the core of your business, and all the different layers. It's kind of like unpeeling like an onion. So we're peeling
Right.
apart all these pieces, and we get to the core thread of it, the end user, right? And what your personality is, your missions, your values. We're trying to understand and extrapolate all the differentiators that make you unique in your business, and how you can help your clients, and how you're communicating and resonating your message directly to their needs. And so in that brand ignite, we peel and get down to the core foundation of what your business is set to do, and how it's going to set itself apart. And then from there, I actually present an action plan that's going to help be the bridge to helping you get to those goals, and show you how we can actually execute on this plan and this foundation and this game plan. And then step three would actually be implementing it and bring it to life. And I call these touchpoint takeover packages, where we're going to take your game plan and personalize and tailor any of our packages to help you bring that vision to life. And then we're executing and bringing the magic to life. So that's a lot of just the simple steps on my end on how I work with my clients. But I know that you've got a lot of clients that may be in that position, may not, for professional expertise, and we can kind of dig underneath all of that, in terms of what will be most helpful for them.
So from a from a brand new practice, there's often a timeline, right? In the sense of I've acquired the building, that's the real estate side of things. I now, I'm either renovating what's inside, depending on what the building looks like, and then from the
Mm-hmm.
aesthetics, we start to talk about your hardware, your computer hardware and network
Mm-hmm.
and your exam rooms, and then down to the aesthetic colors and so forth and so forth. So at what point in the timeline should we should that message and that branding and that strategic design to in their timeline should we start to consider those things, right? Because you have
Yep.
you most times I do believe, and I can only speak from my own experience, but most folks will reverse engineer from the time that they said, oh, I'm going to open my doors here, and then here are the things that need to happen. So from from a brand new practice that's going to be opening, at which point should the strategy of deciding, now I need to have this conversation. How do I,
Yeah.
want to do this from the onset?
Yeah. First thing I would say, every business is a little different because some timelines can be a little bit different in terms of how quick you need to, ultimately you want to be in this building. If you sign the lease and you've secured your contract, the quicker you are in this building, the less rent you have to pay without any clients coming through the door. So
Right.
every business is a little different depending on, what their timelines are. But ultimately, I think specifically for you guys, I would say as early as possible, or right around that time that you've fully committed. Signing a lease and a big contract, that's you're committed to going in these buildings. But you've probably already done some groundwork with business plans, but you may not necessarily have done the external visual communication, the message, the things that are going to actually be the details to pull your whole business together and bring it to life. So once you've secured these pieces, depending on your timelines, I would jump into branding and building the foundation of your business, especially from a brand standpoint, as quick as possible. So that I've had clients that, it we've had conversations before some of those initial leases and those things, and it's great, but you may not have secured the right building, and that could take a whole nother year. Or there might be some zoning rules and zoning laws. I've had clients before
No.
where they've signed the lease and they've got it, and there's a
Right.
few details that they then had to wait another 8 months to a year to kind of figure out and actually move in and publicly launch. So they're curveballs, especially when you're thinking of the building contracts and all the leases and stuff. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you've got a business that you're passionate about, that you want to help people with. I would hop on that as quick as you can in terms of being able to start marketing and start to share the story and start to connect with people that are in the community and start to build ideas and ways to connect with your audience. So that's kind of how I would perceive that.
Now, conversely, if I'm already an existing practice, been practicing for quite some time, I've, built my credibility, but I'm looking
Mm-hmm.
to, renovate or, I have some growth expansion and some additions. And then also the other side of this too is, downsizing. We don't think about downsizing, but there's also,
Yeah.
times where it could be the reverse. You're not expanding, but you're downsizing, right? So what in that awareness of where you are in the scheme of things, and the strategic decisions that you have to make in terms of, again, let's get back to branding and messaging and your connection and your building relationships. What does that mean from a growth, right? Growth is always good because you're growing, but in a downsize
Mm.
piece, that can also convey different many things to your patients. Oh, what does that mean? Are they, can I still see them? Is this accessible? Do we, are they, is my doc still there? Is, things like that. I mean, and it's, the staff and so on, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's many sides to that. And again, I go back to what you mentioned about building relationships, and where human design comes in, is that this is all your touch points, and such an appropriate message. I mean, such an appropriate, company name for you, because it's like we all touch each other at some point. I feel like at times we're 6 degrees from
Yeah.
separation to each other, but
Oh
then
yeah.
that, like, how do you then message those two? So I'm asking you for two things, one as a growth expansion, what's that awareness, strategic design, and human-centered design. And then conversely, if I'm downsizing, right? So, maybe we had 7, but we're now 6 partners, or maybe we had 10, but we're now 5, things like that. And what does that dynamic and how does that, feel for the community?
Yeah, these great questions. So on the other spectrum, when we're thinking of these two different experiences, the one thing that both of these experiences have as a common ground is data. So because they've
Yes.
been in business for so long, so data gives you an advantage that a newer business may not necessarily have, because a lot of things might be a little bit more hypothetical. There's only so much research you can do until you actually, put it to action, put your game plan in action. But if you've been in business for a long time, and whether you're looking to grow or to downsize, you have data to be able to understand the patterns and recognize all the analytics and things that were working, things that weren't working. And in both scenarios, you're at a pivot, right? And you're kind of cutting things off to realign yourselves on the downsize, and in the growth factor, you might be expanding for hiring, or you might just be ready to grow and up level yourself, or there's a multitude of things. But at the end of the day, for both of those scenarios, you have problems that branding can help solve, because it'll help align you to the foundation of what you actually need. So if you were to analyze all those problems and the things that you want to do, there's an example of a client of mine that they've been in business for 15 years, and they've outgrown themselves. They've outgrown their platform, their website, all the things. They were a little outdated, but they were still cutting edge, leading edge of their industry. With where they were, they just needed something. They needed their branding and their language to catch back up with them. So a lot of the times, depending on how technology evolves, and the evolution of your own business and your practice, your culture might change. Your audience may change. You
Yes.
may experience sudden things that you may not feel as dialed in. You might be more community oriented now. You may have changed positions or locations in the community. So there's a lot of reasons for that. And remind me again, what's that part of the second part of the question?
Oh, so if I'm downsizing, right? So the second part of the question is that, there's going to come a time where, either one partner is going to retire, or, two, or, just based on their business model, that they're going to change and that they're going to
Yeah.
downsize. So, if we were, and I'm just stating as an example for discussion, if we were, 10, 10 physician practice, now we're 5, so what does that mean, for the downsizing? What messaging can that be conveyed, that, we're still here, yet we're just, downsize, but we're not, compromising your access, or your, how we treat you in care and delivery, or is it, or it could be, like you said, it could be a culture change, it could be also a change in their services, it could also be, I mean, it's a myriad or plethora of things, of some of the changes. But at the core of it, the concerns that I think, and again, I'm also a patient, right? I mean, all of
Of
you are as
course.
well.
So am I.
Clinicians.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, we're the same healthcare consumer, and we think about, like, well, what does that mean for me if, I'm used to going to a certain place, and now, they're cutting back, then what's that mean, what are my concerns, and so on. And I think that's essential and important in ways of how, you want to convey your message, that, we are still here for you, and we're addressing the, there might be anxiety, there might be fear, but just, the being able to speak to that, to their own truth, obviously, because there's a reason why they're doing that business model,
Of
but still
course.
be able to convey, that message to a patient like me, that has been going there for quite some time, and so on, and the relationship, continues and maintains.
Well, so let me touch on this. I think, every has a different reason for, what, if they're growing, if they're, downsizing. But at the end of the day, I think the message that will help resonate the most with their audience and their community and their patients is an authentic message, is one with integrity, one that has care and thought, and one that allows you to talk directly to them. So I think ultimately it doesn't matter what the message is to them. I think it just means that you want to make sure whatever that message is, it's talking directly to them. And another way
Mm-hmm.
to put that is leading with human. So that way these are your patients, I don't know what the reasons are, but let's say, whatever it is, branding is going to, I think, we think of this word branding, but I think ultimately at the end of the day, you're connecting with other humans. And so how these practices evolve and correlate and, adjust, I think the business structures and all that, I'm trying to think through what the ultimate decisions are, but I'd be curious to see how much of their foundation has been put together in some of these businesses to then make a decision on, maybe they're ready to reevaluate things. Maybe they're ready to change things. Maybe they don't need to necessarily change. Ultimately, it does depend on the business. But we're all kind of dealing with the same thing here and, on the same path with different missions.
You're right. And I kind of go back to what you said about data analytics. And from a data analytics, I love data, and from a data geek,
Yeah.
the interesting piece about data, it can show you how to decide in the next steps. On the other hand, it can also be somewhat overwhelming sometimes. But I do think, just out of curiosity though, like in the data specifically, if we're looking at, on average, I mean, a simplified way, would we be looking at, like a data volume, or is it just like a patient satisfaction, or like, would that be something that, could be considered? And I think there's some association. I'm not sure if we were thinking about messaging. What do you think?
I think as it correlates with data, I think ultimately it comes to the action items that your audience is
Mhm.
taking. So how it can be something physical, but it also can be something digital online. So you can look at all of the different, technology devices you have, let's say your website. Like you can make educated decisions on, how the flow of your audience is actually, taking action or utilizing some of the services, the tools, or the features on your website. Let's say, the data is saying, hey, they land on this site, but they don't scroll past the first homepage. You might have, that might mean that the language isn't communicating enough that they feel inclined to, understand and learn more. So then you might design it in a different way that you can nurture your audience to, scroll through. Maybe they're clicking a little bit more. It depends on ultimately the practice. Do some practices have blogs and different material that you can learn more? I know a lot have resources, but ultimately you want to kind of equip your patients to learn more and maybe understand how your practice is, going to help clients in this way, or how some of the process steps are. So when it comes to websites, for example, there's a lot of data that will help you create more actionable and a more actionable experience for your clients. And on the flip side, let's say, you're learning data from when people walk through the door and they experience your how everything is flowing in the setup of the environment for your clients. You might understand and get feedback, which is some of the surveys you might ask your clients and walk through some experiences, get some reviews. Maybe you take a look at what things were working and what weren't. And ultimately, you're streamlining the experience for your audience. And so, from a business standpoint, I don't think, even in my own business, we're not always savvy and looking directly at what the data is saying in our own businesses, because we're so immersed in our business and helping our people that we don't always get the opportunity to work on the business. But when we do, that's an opportunity for us to be able to analyze what things were working and realign them, streamline them. You might even automate some things. You might see that you're doing a bunch of repeat tasks, and automating something with a click of a button, maybe a little easier, more cost effective for you to be able to, do your job a little better. And then ultimately, this is where branding will help you align all those pieces, and you'll be able to communicate seamlessly to part of that experience where you're bringing to life the visuals and the pieces that are going to be able to help tell the story, and that people know exactly, hey, your practice is serving this, and this is my need. So when you're circling your messaging around the pain points of your clients, that's when everything is making sense, because you're resonating directly with your audience, and they feel heard because the language that you're speaking is very specific to them.
Well, it sounds like we're going to need a round two here, my friend. Time is coming up, but I
Oh,
don't
we're
I
up
don't want to be
already.
remiss to make sure that you have, what's your information, making sure that everyone gets that information. So we have literally like 10 seconds left. And if you can just, and I'll repost again your information. So please do.
Of course.
And I will also definitely we're going to have a round two. It sounds like we need to have a few more sessions as well. So we will certainly bring Jake back. And lastly, we're also streaming in YouTube, but I'll put that information as well. So Jake, please give us your information.
Absolutely. Well, I'd say the best way to learn more about my process and how branding can help your services is touchpoint-design.com. And then I'm on social as well. And I would say you could follow the Instagram, and it's touchpoint_design. And she'll put the links in here. But yeah, best way to connect with me.
Excellent. Thank you, Jake, so much. I learned a lot, and thank you for all of that, your information. You guys best believe I'm going to have a round two with Jake here, and we're going to talk all things human design and branding. So thank you so much. Thank you, and you have a great day.